We're just weeks away from the vote for who will be on the Disney board, and the Walt Disney Company, as it currently is constituted, is preparing for absolute war to prevent Nelson Peltz, Jay Rasulo, and others from having access to the company. Get ready, Bob. It's time for a fight. Hello, folks. Welcome back to the channel where we are helping wake up Hollyweird to the fact they have to make a profit. And the only profit they can find is by creating a product for audiences that exist. Go woke. Go the way of the video game industry. Folks, we are here today to talk to you about the battle royale that is about to break out within the Walt Disney Company over this issue of Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo, former chief financial officer of Disney, getting access to the board. Of course, they are backed by Ike Perlmutter, others, but perhaps most importantly, it seems like Elon Musk is getting ready to weigh in. And as a result, Disney is sparing no expense when it comes to going all out, fighting back and trying to prevent it. This, a tweet from Scott Gustin. Disney published a new fact versus fiction page on its Vote Disney website that refutes claims made by Nelson Peltz and Trian Fund Management. Now, I really like what Scott does. I would simply say, Scott, in the future, say that it claims to refute. That way you're not stepping into any type of bias. Disney specifically addressed Peltz's track record and Jay Rasulo's stale perspective on the media industry. Now, what you're going to notice is that Disney is not pulling punches now, and that seems to indicate that Disney has real worry that on this vote, especially after Jim Cramer says he's going to vote for Nelson Peltz, Disney is in full-on panic mode. Here are some of these fact versus fiction what would you say, rebuttals to Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo. False claim, according to Disney. In his letter to shareholders, Nelson Peltz claims he has media expertise. The truth. By the way, they said, I have no media experience. I don't claim to have any. That from Nelson Peltz, January 18th, 2024. We've covered that here. I don't think that Nelson Peltz has direct media expertise, but I'm also not... I'm not suspecting that Disney is fairly and contextually presenting that Peltz made a claim. So let's leave that where it is. Trian claims Jay Rasulo's media experience and business acumen will be additive to the board. Talks about how Jay Rasulo joined iHeartMedia board in 2019 as lead independent director and the stock declining by 90%. What Disney doesn't mention here is that that was sort of known and this was a managed fall because of the decline in radio. But Jay Rasulo's record at Disney prior to 2016 and for many decades, folks, is impeccable. And after Rasulo left, the company began to fall. So by 2019, you could easily say that Disney had reached the apex of its prowess, and then it declined since. It really depends on the department that you're looking at on which one's declined. Animation probably had its apex in 2017, Star Wars 2016, Marvel 2019. You can see how this works. The parks had their surge in 2020, 2021, and have been on the decline since. So Rasulo in his time at Disney, very strong. False claim, according to Disney. Mr. Peltz claims Trian Partners has a stake of greater than $3 billion in Disney and to speak for all shareholders. According to Trian's own filings, Mr. Peltz and Trian Fund Management own 6.8 million Disney shares, fewer than the 9.4 million shares Trian owned a year ago. And folks, again, we talked about this and what is going on here. Valiant Renegade covered this. We sent you to that video in particular, and this may be another piece of a little bit of trickery. And then finally, Mr. Peltz claims the board on which he has sat have on average outperformed the S&P by 900 BPS annually. And of course, the truth, according to Disney, is that Peltz or Trian involvement on boards resulted in TSR underperformance versus the S&P 500 in greater or less than 68% of cases, approximate. All right, so what is the truth about all that? Well, the truth is that that seems to me to be obfuscating. Now, why do I say that? I'm not trying to be overly harsh with Disney. Not at all, folks. I'm trying to say that the bottom line is Disney needs to moderate. And all of that stuff is pulling us away from Disney needing to moderate. And we all know Disney needs to moderate because we've all watched the videos of Disney personnel claiming that they've got a not-so-secret agenda that was fully endorsed and supported by the company. So we know that Disney needs to go back to the center. The sensible center is where Disney needs to be. Why does it need to be there? Because it's not ideally a political company. Disney isn't an ideally universally beloved family entertainment company where kids are safe. It's not a company that should be involved heavily in politics and moving your child from Pixar to gambling. And that seems to be where Bob Iger is putting it. And Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo want to come in and provide an opposing viewpoint. And they're the best that exist at the moment. And they've got the backing, apparently, of Elon Musk. Now, Disney is attacking them. And, each one of those would require 30 minutes for us to go through and explain, the ins and outs. And I'm not saying that Disney's wrong on every single point either. I want to make that very clear. But let's see what Jay Rasulo has to say back in regards to this. We're going to watch this. We're going to explain what's going on here. Folks, this is out of CNBC. And it's not lost on me that part of why Disney is in freakout mode is Jim Cramer. Whatever you might think about his track record with stocks and stock prognostications, well, when he comes out to his audience and says he's voting for Nelson Peltz because he doesn't like losing money anymore, that is every red alert inside the Disney C-suite over there in Burbank that you can imagine. All right, here's the interview with Jay Rasulo, former chief financial officer of Disney, who is part of that package deal of getting Nelson and Jay Rasulo on the board.
The Disney proxy fight soldiers on. Nelson Peltz's Trian Partners is now pushing for Disney's former CFO, Jay Rasulo, to join the board as well. He served as the finance chief for 5 years until leaving in 2015 after serving at the company for nearly 30 years, including a 7-year run as head of Disney Parks.
So take a look at that, folks. Worked at Disney for 29 years, including head of parks. He has a tremendous track record, and he's been overseeing the decline of iHeartMedia, but everybody knows radio in that particular way is on a decline. That's not a surprise, but it is a public relations weakness when it comes to how Disney can approach it.
And resorts. He currently serves as a lead independent director on the board of iHeartMedia. Joining us now in a CNBC exclusive, former Disney CFO, Jay Rasulo. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time.
Pleasure to be here, Sarah. Thank you.
So I'll just ask the basic question, which is why are you joining Nelson Peltz in this fight? And what do you think you can bring to Disney's board?
Well, Sarah, as you said, I spent the majority of my adult life, 30 years, at the Walt Disney Company. It is a company I love. It is a company whose products I was proud to be part of developing and distributing around the world. Disney brings a smile to everybody's face, with the exception in the recent history, and actually if you go pretty far back, with the exception of shareholders who do not.
I want to pause here for just a moment, folks. I want to bring your attention to something. We've been seeing a rather steady, very incremental decline in that stock price. No financial advice here, but we've been seeing that since that giant bump they received out of the earnings call. And that may be at least partially due to the fact that when Disney made that earnings call, they told us that the Fortnite collaboration was here. They were buying $1.5 billion. We found out later it's going to be at least 2 years before any of that actually has an impact in terms of Disney having product inside that game. We were told about this J-League collaboration with a bunch of different companies when it came to sports delivery. We found out that that has not cleared the hurdles it needs to with regulators. We also found out that they're going to be sued over that probably. We can keep going on all the things that were promised. We were told that Moana 2 is coming in November. We found out they don't have the voice artists signed yet. I can keep going. There were many things told to investors during that earnings call that we found out later on, while they might happen, it's going to be a tough road because not everything was lined up. And it reminds me of the Hulu deal. We'll leave it there. We'll keep going.
Not have a smile on their face. So when Nelson reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to become part of this, I couldn't stay on the sidelines.
So Disney has responded, I would say, pretty aggressively to your case for joining the board. This just in from a Disney spokesperson to us in anticipation of this interview, Jay. They say Jay Rasulo left Disney more than 8 years ago when both the company and the broader industry looked radically different. And in our view, his analog perspective is not relevant to the challenges of today's digital media landscape.
Before he gives an answer, I just want to say that they're purposefully attempting to incite some sort of less than moderate response by calling his views after 30 years in the company analog perspective. They're trying to call him a dinosaur.
They go on with more, but just can you respond to that it's a whole different environment right now and you haven't been there for 8 years?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's true I haven't been there for 8 years, but I haven't been in a cave for 8 years either. I've been on a couple of boards. I'm on the iHeart board, which is a company that has remained relevant in a difficult broadcast industry by becoming digital. A significant portion of the revenue of iHeart is in digital. They've become the #1 podcast publisher.
Another thing, folks, you need to pay very close attention to when it comes to the news. Let me give you the meta-analysis here. We'll keep going. I apologize for interruption. When the Disney chart came up, the Disney chart on CNBC showed when Disney popped from the earnings call, so it made that chart look really good. It was a 1-month chart. When Jay Rasulo starts talking about our iHeartMedia, which again is a managed, controlled drop to keep the company from absolute collapse because of the paradigm shift in radio, you'll notice they go back to 2019, which makes the drop look dramatic. In other words, whoever's in charge of the charts chose the best chart possible for Disney and the worst chart possible for iHeartMedia. And it's not lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on you.
2 times the next competitor. And you know what? Let me tell you a brief story. In 2010, I had been in the parks division for almost 15 years, very different from the media side of the company. In the beginning of 2010, Bob Iger asked me to step up as CFO. In 2 months, I was representing the company to shareholders in earnings calls. I did 22 of those, countless conferences representing the company. And you know what? Most of those questions were about media.
Here's a better chart on the right side. Take a look at that bump that we saw just after the pandemic. You'll notice the trough in 2020. You'll notice that giant cliff that sits up there. That giant apex is when Bob Chapek was CEO. And you'll notice that now there's this little climb that's got Disney back over the 100 mark. And Bob Iger is very excited about that because that makes it easier. And there's no doubt about it. It makes it easier for Disney to defend against this proxy battle. But it's hard for shareholders who bought in after the pandemic to be excited, I think, about 108.
So I think a pretty quick study. I think I can take this on.
You know, they address your tenure at iHeartMedia as director, and we're looking at the stock price. And Jay, I mean, they say a 90% decline in the share price of iHeartMedia since you joined the board as the lead independent director almost 5 years ago, and the stock price is ugly. So why do you point to that, especially in a fight where you guys are pointing to Disney's share price underperformance?
Well, I think first of all, it's a very different case. We're here to talk about Disney, but I joined the iHeart board as it emerged from bankruptcy. It came out of bankruptcy with a very, very difficult balance sheet. But if you look at the financial performance of iHeart, if you look at the free cash flow that iHeart generates, if you look at their position, a growing position in digital media and podcast, the board, aligned with management, has put this company in a very good place to recapitalize the company, to deal with the balance sheet issues. And I think you're going to see a very different picture in the future.
So just to explain this, folks, Jay Rasulo leaves the Disney company in circa 2016. In 2019, he takes on an extremely challenging case, and probably brought in because he was the Disney CFO, and therefore he's the big kahuna. He's brought in to try to salvage and save a company that is filed for bankruptcy. And so then that is used against him by the Disney statements. Now, Disney doesn't come out and tell their shareholders, hey, this guy went in and attempted to save a company, and you get the idea. In other words, he's come in to try to fix a very big problem. That said, that's another PR weakness here for Nelson Peltz and for Jay Rasulo, and we need to identify that.
Jay, it's David. Back to the topic at hand. What would you do to fix Disney?
David, that's an excellent question. And I think that the problems that we see at Disney, have a very obvious root cause. And that cause is poor oversight by a complacent board. Boards are not responsible for managing the company. They are responsible for managing the shareholders' interests in the company. And that means that they have to have focus on the company's strategy. They have to have alignment with shareholders, and they have to have accountability. And if you look at their score across those measures, it has been absolutely horrible. It's been 10 years of bungled succession planning, which is still as recently as a few months ago, took another step in the wrong direction. It is the second worst company in the S&P on say on pay, which means that investors, shareholders do not believe that the performance of the company matches the pay that NEOs are getting. NEOs are getting.
Now, I want to pause here for a moment too and mention that one of the things that's so important about this S&P underperformance is that it's not only the S&P, it's the Dow 30. Disney is the exemplar entertainment company inside the Dow 30. And as such, Disney is also one of the worst performing companies inside the Dow 30 over the last 10 years. And as a result of that, Disney has been holding down the Dow 30 in terms of its overall appearance to the rest of the market. That's another key point that I expect Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo to be bringing out as they continue to formulate why shareholders should be voting for them to put them on the board. Now, of course, Disney's going to keep pointing back to that iHeart Radio situation, and we'll see how that goes. They're also going to continue to hammer Nelson Peltz on lack of media experience. But as you were looking at that board just a moment ago, remember that there aren't that many people on that board who have media experience, and I would even suggest that some of the people on that board tend to just have maybe familial and friendly relationships, and that's how they arrived there.
But Jay, none of that is about fixing Disney per se. I mean, you know, what's been notably absent, and I've followed obviously Mr. Peltz, is Sarah.
Pause again for just a moment. That is a question that already embeds the win for Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo. This needs to be understood, folks. The fact that they're asking the question of how to fix Disney means that Disney has a problem which needs to be fixed. So the fact that the media is asking how will you fix Disney means that it's broken. Listen to that closely. The win is already embedded in the achievement of having folks recognize there's a broken nature to Disney. And you can't fix what's not broken. So if you're going to fix anything, it must be broken.
Has for many years, at least from my perspective, is while he keeps talking and you talk about getting margins up, I'm not seeing a plan here, as is more often the case with Trian. And so, again, what would your plan be? What would you be doing that is not happening now, especially given the very strong quarter the company just put up, the significant cost savings that seem to be reached, if not exceeded, and the turnaround at direct-to-consumer?
Well, I think you're absolutely wrong, David, about...
I'm reminded of some SNL skits right now that I won't bring to your attention, but let's just say Dan Aykroyd was involved in one of them.
The fact that fixing the board and getting the board aligned with shareholders does not improve the performance of the company. The board is responsible for holding the management team accountable. They are not responsible for developing the strategy of the company. They're responsible for reviewing capital deployment. They are responsible for reviewing communications to shareholders. They're responsible of paying consistent.
Hang on just a second, folks. We got to go back to this for just a minute. I want to go through what's being put beside his face, which he may not know is beside him. And I in particular want to draw your attention to the very bottom here. And this, folks, the reason we're doing this is I want you to have the highest level analysis possible on this channel of what's going on with Disney. And I don't want to, you know, we have said that we advocate for Disney to come back to the sensible center. And in that regard, I'm all for Nelson Peltz being on that board. But I'm not here to give you any kind of propaganda. I'm not here to sway you with false information. That's not always the case, though, and sometimes it's unintentional when it comes to these charts. Take a look at this item point, the bottom one. Streaming losses narrowed to $216 million from $1.05 billion last year. Now, technically, that's true. Literally, it's true. What is missing in that analysis is that the Walt Disney Company cut their streaming losses not by growing, but by cutting content. And how did they cut the content? Well, the content was cut de facto because Disney could not produce anything due to the Hollywood strikes. So therefore, there were no expenditures because Disney could not make content. They could not produce shows or movies during that quarter. That's how they removed that loss. It's not because they grew subscribers. It's not because Disney Plus is more successful. It's not because it's competitive with Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and YouTube. It's not. In fact, it's more distant now. And the prospects for Disney Plus are worse now. But you can cut your losses by cutting everything you're doing in terms of investment and building up an item. You can do that. So it's kind of like a hardware store that cuts its losses by not buying any inventory. That only works so long. All right, continue back.
They're responsible of paying consistent with performance. None of those things happen at Disney, and when they happen at a well-managed company with a well-managed board, guess what? The performance improves. So if you're asking us what we will do when we get on it will be to fix those fundamental problems. David, this company has invested $200 billion, more than their market cap, over the last 5 years. And by every conceivable financial measure, the company is down. I don't know how a board can allow that to happen. The company's shareholder communications have been so incomprehensible to the market that there's this, there's that, look over here, look over there. It's a smokescreen. And there's absolutely not clear communication. It is holding the share price down. It is holding returns to shareholders down. And I worked with that board at Disney.
You don't think they turned the corner at all? You don't think that last quarter?
So let's go through these, folks. These are great on the right side. $1.5 billion stake in Epic Games. We found out that's going to be at least 2 years before we get a return on that. Now, I've said on this channel, and this is part of that calling balls and strikes, that if they get a good deal with Epic Games where there's an entirely Disney-fied mode of the game available, sort of like Lego Fortnite, that's a win for Disney, and I'm all about that. I think the $1.5 billion is expensive for that because you can generate a AAA game on your own for far less. However, Disney doesn't have any kind of partnership that would give them the talent they need, so the purchase of Epic Games makes sense. I question whether it should have costed $1.5 billion to get this done, but overall a win. Plans to launch ESPN streaming service in 2025. You'll notice that we didn't get any information about the NFL buying into ESPN. You'll notice that we haven't heard anything about the regulations that are going to take place with ESPN and this gambling implementation that they want to do straight into the app, and the hit that's going to have on the company with folks saying, you know what, I don't know if I want my child raised by them, and then hand them over to gamble on sports. And then the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, I mean, that's fine. It's a $70 million, $80 million buy of a media product that's going to be there for maybe a year. But that's nothing to put up on the screen for a major financial decision from the company.
There was evidence of Iger having come back now and been there for over a year, sort of reasserting himself and doing the things he's promised to do. You don't view that quarter in that perspective?
I will tell you this, David. I didn't understand, as a student of this business, I didn't understand a thing about what they said in terms of what they're doing, for instance, with ESPN. That joint venture shocked their biggest suppliers of IP. It shocked the Justice Department. Mm-hmm. If Warner's doesn't have...
What he's saying here, folks, is so important to recognize. The reason that it shocked so many, and he's right about this, the reason that it shocked so many is because, in my estimation, again, though, no financial advice here, Disney had to throw spaghetti against the wall. Disney had to do whatever they could to try to elevate the stock prior to this next vote. And that meant throwing stuff out there, even if it doesn't make sense, even if you don't understand it, it needs to be headline generating. I think this also goes back to, folks, you need to be watching the stuff that Master of the TDS has been bringing out on his YouTube channel and here on this channel and others, because it's not the typical manipulation of the internet that we've been watching over the past however many years. It's way beyond that in the stuff that he's covering. And getting headlines out into the ether, getting headlines out there is a big deal in today's media. What would you say? Spectrum, cloud, availability to the public. And the reason for those headlines being so important is because many folks don't go beyond the headline. And if you can get the headline trending, that seems to have an impact not only on the public at large when it comes to politics, but also when it comes to investing. Just a suggestion.
Happen to get the NBA. They're not even a player. They don't know how it's going to be priced. It's going to take a blowtorch to the linear business. And everyone who knows business knows if you have a business in decline like linear ESPN, you have a strategy for it. You invest less capital in it. You use the cash that it produces to grow businesses. And that's not what was communicated there. The other announcement about Epic, I was a CFO for 5 years. I did many earnings calls. And sometimes you don't want to give information out about what your plans are and what.
This is a tremendous point to end on. And it speaks to the fact that Disney is willing to give away what they're going to do in 2 years, 3 years to get through the immediate quarter to lift that stock price. My view, folks, my view, not absolute, not totally objective, but my view, to get to that vote and get across the line and live to see another day without Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo on the board. willing to give away what's coming out in 2-3 years in the immediate quarter. What a great point.
What your planned returns are, but when the CFO comes on your program and says, I don't know what the games are, I don't know what the timing is, I wonder what they said to the board to get $1.5 billion of.
What another great point to just come out and say, hey, we're going to have a video game something and another in some kind of time. No idea how much it's going to make. No, this is what we're talking about. What a great point about the spaghetti on the wall.
Approved. And it's things like that the board should not have to happen.
Well, he might not just have wanted to speak publicly, Hugh Johnston, about the
Sarah,
epic.
when you don't want to speak publicly, you say, I'm not ready to talk about that. You don't say, we don't know what the games are and we don't know what the timing is or the financial return.
All right, folks, that's where we're going to wind it up. There are those on the side of Disney. There are those on the side of Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo. I'm not here to try to give you a slanted coverage other than to say that I think that Disney needs to be moved to the center. I think it's demonstrably not in the center. I think it's in its best place possible when it is in the center. And Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo seem to want to push it to the center. Maybe there's somebody else that could come in there. I also, folks, because I believe in playing it fair and square with all of you out there, I don't think, I'll be happy if it happens, but I don't think that Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo are going to be successful this year. Let me say it again, this year. But I think that Disney has just about run the gas out of the tank, and I think that the latter half of this year in 2025 could be just absolutely awful because they've spent just about everything they can to get themselves, number one, into a penny of profitability when it comes to Disney Plus by the fourth quarter. That's going to come at the expense of cutting almost everything. And then trying to get Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo off the board by having a good quarter in the past one, despite the fact that Disney Plus subscribers lost, which is the prime way in which you grow the business that is Disney. So by expending everything in the tank, I think that next year is a different story. And for Disney, it may cost them more board seats than this time. But what do I know, folks? No financial advice here. You come up with your own solutions, ideas, and analysis, folks. Again, positives and negatives here. Disney does have some PR hits they can take against these men. Disney did make a good decision by getting into Epic Games, I believe, although possibly at too high a price. But they also don't have leverage, so maybe they had to buy in at that amount. But yeah, so there are positives on Disney's side. There are negatives. I would say, though, that simply put, from a philosophical standpoint, Disney should be in the center. That's the, you don't go to McDonald's and expect to get politics. And that was the case with Disney. If McDonald's got into politics, they'd cut their attendance by 40%. Thus, Disney did as well. All right, folks, that is the topic for today. We hope that you can walk away now with an immense understanding of what's going on. And don't forget that Disney will be waging war against these men, as people like Jim Cramer say, to put them on the board. It is an all-out battle royale. But not here, folks, not here, because our only battle is to get you to click that like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms, it's the notification bell. Drop a comment down below, let us know your thoughts. And folks, as always, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, keep having fun, and one day too late, happy birthday, Mexican Iron Man.
Clickbait, fraud, drama queen. Ugh, I wish there was a channel that was 5 to 6 minute news reads without the drama, frauds, and clickbait that could accurately let me know the current news, providing my crucial context utilizing all the different That Park Place contributors and creators.
Well, stupid, there is. It's the That Park Place YouTube channel, which will be going live real soon, so make sure you're subscribed, so you can really stick it to the algorithms.
You're joking.
Nope.
Oh my.
Wow.